Beneath the calm waves of Bikini Bottom, life flowed in gentle rhythms. Tiny currents swirled through coral reefs, the soft light of the ocean shimmered in patterns across the sand, and sea creatures moved in quiet routines that spoke of balance and continuity. In the heart of this underwater town lived a family whose presence was both familiar and comforting to all who passed by. The family of Mr. Krabs, Eugene H. Krabs, better known as Mr. Quarry. Krabs had built his life around diligence, care, and the pursuit of stability. The Krusty Krab, his small yet bustling restaurant, was a monument to his dedication, each corner imbued with his attention and precise planning. But beneath the surface of this industriousness, a gentler story unfolded, one centered on his daughter, a young fish whose existence bridged both the world of work and the subtle magic of childhood curiosity. Her name was Pearl Krabs, a name that spoke of beauty, rarity, and quiet luminescence beneath the waves. She was Mr. Krabs' only child, the fruit of love and care carefully nurtured. Unlike her father, whose heart often dwelled in ledgers, registers, and the clinking of coins, Pearl embodied the ocean's softness and patience. Her scales caught the muted light filtering from above, shifting in colors of pink, soft coral, and the faintest shimmer of gold, a reflection of both her vitality and the gentle nature of her upbringing. Her mother, though absent from her daily life, was remembered in stories and soft recollections. She had been a creature of grace, gentle and warm, whose presence lingered in the quiet corners of Pearl's heart. Though Mr. Krabs rarely spoke of her, he carried her memory carefully, sharing fragments through tales, lessons, and gestures of care that shaped the young Pearl's understanding of love and kindness. Pearl's days began with the lightest stirrings of the ocean currents. She would rise slowly, her fins brushing the sandy floor of their home, feeling the grains shift under her movement. The ocean itself seemed to recognize her presence, waves brushing softly against coral walls, currents guiding her steps, tiny creatures moving aside in quiet acknowledgement. Even in stillness, she could sense the pulse of life around her, the intricate rhythm of the underwater town. Breakfast was a gentle ritual. Pearl would glide through the soft sands and nearby kelp gardens, gathering small morsels provided by the ocean's abundance. Each movement was deliberate, measured, and filled with attention. She did not hurry, for her father had taught her that life's true value lies in awareness, in observing the small things and letting them resonate within one's heart. Each morsel of food, each sip of filtered water, became a quiet acknowledgement of the world's balance and generosity. Once breakfast concluded, Pearl often ventured toward the Krusty Krab. She would watch her father as he prepared the restaurant for the day, seeing him move with precision and energy. His claws worked with efficiency, each patty flipped and each order prepared with care. She saw in him both a teacher and a guardian, someone whose dedication ensured not only the survival of their family, but also the stability of the community around them. Pearl's relationship with her father was a dance of contrasts. While Mr. Krabs focused on order, responsibility, and the accumulation of resources, Pearl brought softness, patience, and a gentle curiosity. She would notice the small things her father overlooked, a shimmering shell on the counter, the way the light bent across the fryers, the subtle shifts of the sand outside the restaurant. Yet, in her quiet observation, she complimented him, providing the balance he often missed in his relentless pursuit of stability. In the quiet moments, Pearl explored the streets of Bikini Bottom. The town itself was alive, with subtle sounds and movements, the rustle of kelp, the distant chatter of fish, the muted hum of the jellyfish fields. Each pathway held small discoveries, hidden nooks between coral, tiny creatures scuttling along the sand, patterns in the light that revealed the ocean's constant motion. Through these wanderings, Pearl absorbed the town's rhythm, learning patience, awareness, and the intricate beauty of her surroundings. Though young, Pearl was aware of her place in the world. She was the daughter of Mr. Krabs, inheritor not only of his legacy but also of his responsibilities. Yet she carried within her a vision of life that stretched beyond registers, coins, and work. Her world was the quiet elegance of the ocean, the gentle sway of currents, and the endless wonder of discovery. Her family, though small, was anchored in care. Mr. Krabs' love for her was sometimes hidden beneath layers of business, frugality, and routine, but it was profound, steady, and unwavering. In return, Pearl offered him joy, patience, and moments of reflection, reminders that life was more than work, more than accumulation, more than survival. Together, they formed a bond that was subtle, enduring, and deeply rooted in the rhythm of the underwater world. As the sun filtered through the water, casting patterns of light across the ocean floor, Pearl would often pause at the edge of the town, gazing toward the horizon. She felt the gentle tug of adventure, curiosity about the vast expanse beyond Bikini Bottom, yet also a deep contentment in the world she knew. Each day offered new discoveries, small joys, and the chance to weave herself more fully into the life around her. Even in moments of quiet, Pearl sensed the pulse of the ocean, the rhythm of time beneath the waves, and the gentle song of life that connected every creature, every grain of sand, every drifting current. And in these moments, she understood the subtle truths her father lived by, that care, attention, and love were the foundation of life, and that the smallest gestures could echo across the vastness of the world. Thus began the life of Pearl Krabs, daughter of Mr. Krabs, navigating the gentle currents of Bikini Bottom. Her days were filled with exploration, quiet reflection, and the lessons of patience and balance imparted by her father. Though the ocean stretched infinitely around her, she moved with assurance, knowing that her home, her family, and the rhythm of her world were constant anchors in a life of discovery. And as she drifted through the coral gardens, past the sandy streets and softly glowing kelp, Pearl carried with her the quiet essence of her lineage, the love of her father, and the gentle curiosity that would shape every ripple of her days in the quiet shores of Bikini Bottom. The morning in Bikini Bottom unfolded with a quiet, steady rhythm. Sunlight filtered through the water in gentle shafts, brushing the ocean floor with soft illumination that rippled over sand and coral alike. Even the smallest particles seemed to dance in harmony, moving with the currents, shifting with subtle grace. For Pearl Krabs, the daughter of Mr. Krabs, each day began not with urgency, but with a patient awareness of the world around her, a deep attention to its gentle cadences. She rose from her bed, within the cozy coral structure she called home, a space adorned with seashells, soft strands of kelp, and the quiet treasures she had gathered over time. The room reflected her personality, simple yet vibrant, alive with soft shades of pink, coral, and golden light that shimmered across the walls as she moved. Every morning, she lingered a moment, letting the filtered sun highlight her surroundings, allowing the gentle rhythm of the ocean to set the pace for the day. Her first steps, or rather, gentle glides, were toward the kitchen. Though breakfast was simple, it was a moment of reflection. Pearl carefully selected small morsels from the ocean's abundance, delicate clams, soft seaweed, and tiny crustaceans that had settled among the corals. She moved slowly, appreciating textures, flavors, and the ease with which the sea provided sustenance. Each bite was a reminder of life's quiet generosity, a soft meditation on the balance that held Bikini Bottom together. Once nourished, Pearl ventured out of her home into the streets of her underwater town. The sand beneath her fins shifted softly, forming patterns that echoed the gentle currents flowing through the city. Tiny creatures scuttled along the ocean floor, drifting in their own quiet routines, oblivious to the larger motions of the town, yet contributing to its constant pulse. Pearl moved among them like a soft current herself, part of the flow, attentive but unobtrusive. The Krusty Krab, her, a father's bustling establishment, called to her next. Though she often lingered at the entrance, she rarely entered fully. This was her father's realm, a place of energy, purpose, and careful organization. Still, she observed, Mr. Krabs moved with deliberate precision, flipping patties and arranging trays, his every motion disciplined and exact. Employees moved in tandem with his rhythm, spatulas and pans performing a choreography of labor perfected over countless mornings. Pearl did not intervene. She watched, absorbing the lessons in patience and attention, seeing the care her father poured into even the smallest details. Though she was young, she understood something subtle. Life required both energy and gentleness, action and stillness. Her father's world was one of productivity. Hers was one of quiet observation. Yet both coexisted, linked by the unspoken bond of family and the rhythm of shared existence. As the morning deepened, Pearl often drifted toward familiar corners of Bikini Bottom. The jellyfish meadows beckoned with their subtle luminescence, tiny creatures pulsing in patterns that mirrored the gentle heartbeat of the ocean. She watched the jellyfish drift gracefully through the water, their movements a soft dance that reflected the patience required to exist in harmony with the currents. Occasionally, she would move alongside them, her fins brushing the water in gentle arcs, feeling the same flow and rhythm that governed their dance. The streets themselves offered moments of quiet discovery. Tiny sand dunes shifted beneath her weight, shells glimmered in soft colors, and occasional schools of fish passed by in synchronized movement. Pearl followed their patterns, tracing arcs through the water, moving in harmony with the currents, noticing the subtle interactions between creature and environment, the way the town's life unfolded in delicate layers of activity. By midday, the sun's light penetrated more fully into the water, creating shifting mosaics on the ocean floor. Pearl often paused to watch these patterns, letting them flow across her scales in subtle reflection. The light was neither hurried nor fixed. It moved gently, spreading warmth and clarity without force. She felt the energy of the sun filtered through water, the rhythm of life carried in photons and currents, and she allowed herself to become part of the flow, a single note in the soft melody of the ocean. Sometimes, her exploration took her to Goo Lagoon, where the waves rolled in mild rhythm over sands and pebbles, and distant laughter carried across the water. Pearl would drift along the shore, careful not to disturb the delicate patterns of sand sculpted by the tides, letting the ebb and flow guide her motion. She observed the interactions of other sea creatures, playful exchanges, gentle nudges, and moments of quiet cooperation, learning, without words, the social currents that shaped life beyond her immediate home. As the afternoon settled into the soft blue of deeper waters, Pearl often returned toward the coral gardens near her home. Here, life was dense and intricate, swaying kelp, hidden nooks, and tiny fish weaving through the folds of reef. She moved slowly, exploring the shapes, textures, and muted colors, tracing the rhythm of the underwater world in detail. Each moment was a meditation, a way to harmonize with the flow of her surroundings, and a quiet preparation for the evening to come. By the time Mr. Krabs concluded his day at the Krusty Krab, Pearl was often at home, reflecting on the rhythms she had witnessed. She would sit quietly, fins folded gently, watching the subtle movements of her surroundings, the sway of coral, the pulse of currents, the shimmer of tiny fish weaving through the water. She understood, in ways words could not capture, that these daily flows of life, so small, so intricate, so interconnected, were the foundation of her existence and the rhythm her father sought to uphold through his God. Work. Evenings in Bikini Bottom were serene. The light filtered down at a softer angle, shifting the colors of the sand and coral into muted, soothing hues. Pearl would drift near the surface briefly, letting the gentle sunrays touch her scales, watching as the town settled into calm. Sounds softened. The distant hum of the Krusty Krab faded, currents slowed, and creatures found rest. The ocean itself seemed to breathe gently, carrying the collective sigh of a day well lived. Before resting, Pearl would glide past her father's office, pausing to sense his presence even if he was focused on his accounts or preparing for the next day. Though their interactions had been minimal, their bond was profound, woven through shared rhythms, observations, and quiet care. She could feel the weight of responsibility and the warmth of protection, and in turn, her presence brought a subtle peace, a soft counterbalance to his diligence. As night settled in, Pearl would finally return to her cozy, coral home. The water was still, the light dim and comforting, and the gentle movements of tiny creatures carried a lullaby only the ocean could compose. She would settle among her soft coral furnishings, letting her fins drift lazily through the water as she reflected on the currents of the day. Every motion, every ripple, every sound was part of a larger pattern, a melody that carried her toward rest. And in this tranquil underwater world, Pearl Krabs understood, even without words, that life was a series of flows, currents that carried her through discovery, responsibility, observation, and reflection. Each day was a note in the quiet symphony of Bikini Bottom, a melody shaped by care, attention, and connection. Thus continued her life, gentle, observant, and serene, guided by the rhythms of the ocean, the subtle wisdom of her father, and the quiet beauty of a world that moved with infinite patience and harmony. The morning sun filtered softly through the water above Bikini Bottom, painting gentle streaks across the coral and sand. Pearl Krabs awoke to the rhythmic sway of her home's kelp curtains and the distant hum of life in the town around her. Though every day held the same foundational rhythms of nourishment, observation, and reflection, today promised a gentle variation, a quiet adventure through the familiar streets and hidden corners of her underwater world. Pearl rose and moved through her home with deliberate grace. She touched the smooth curves of coral furniture, felt the subtle vibration of shells lining her walls, and listened to the soft murmur of the currents flowing past her windows. The ocean itself seemed to respond to her presence, offering a gentle push with every fin stroke, carrying her forward into the day. Her mind, though youthful, was attuned to the minute details of the world, the way sunlight bent as it passed through water, the shimmer of sand grains shifting beneath her fins, and the delicate interactions of small fish weaving through nearby coral. Her first destination was the sandy pathways near the outskirts of town, where schools of tiny fish moved in perfect synchrony. Pearl followed their arcs with measured strokes, feeling the rhythm of the currents as they intertwined with the natural motion of life. She found comfort in the predictability of their patterns, yet she also noticed the small variations: a ripple caused by a passing crab, a glimmer of sunlight reflecting off a scale, the gentle separation of one fish from the school before it rejoined. Each movement was a reminder that even in repetition, life was never truly identical, and that observation brought subtle joy. The streets of Bikini Bottom were already waking. Jellyfish meadows shimmered faintly in the distance, their bioluminescence muted by the morning sun, yet still present in delicate pulsations. Pearl drifted closer, observing the creatures' movements as they traced arcs through the water. Each pulse, each glide, each tiny flicker of tentacle was a lesson in gentle motion, a rhythm she could harmonize with if she allowed herself the patience to follow. While she explored, Pearl encountered friends from her age group, young fish who shared her curiosity, though each moved at a pace and rhythm different from her own. They had their own play, their own energy, yet Pearl found joy in their presence, not through noisy interaction, but by simply joining in subtle ways, following the arcs of a playful swirl of water, mirroring the gentle twitches of fins, or observing the quiet laughter that resonated through currents. Friendship, she understood, could exist even in quiet companionship, without spoken words, relying instead on shared presence and attention. Their explorations led them toward the coral gardens near Lagoon, a place where sand shifted easily and small crevices held tiny treasures waiting to be discovered. Pearl moved among the formations, tracing her fins along ridges, feeling the textures of coral surfaces and noting the faint vibrations of life concealed within them. Here, even the smallest movement could reveal wonders. A hidden crab scuttling along a stone, a delicate shell caught in a swirl of sand, a glint of sunlight on a tiny piece of sea glass. Each discovery brought a sense of wonder, a gentle thrill that required neither haste nor noise. The group's journey continued along small, quiet passages of the ocean floor, where soft currents whispered through seaweed and sand, rippled in patterns shaped by invisible forces. Pearl paused frequently, observing the subtle play of light, the way the water bent around a cluster of kelp, or the gentle drift of a plankton cloud. Her friends, though less observant, learned to slow in her presence, mirroring her careful pace, feeling the calm attention she carried like an unspoken song through the currents. Even in moments of play, Pearl found ways to harmonize with the rhythms of life. They would drift through arches of coral, glide around clusters of anemones, or follow the gentle spirals of floating particles, moving not with urgency, but with careful attention to each motion. She noticed the resonance of laughter and joy, soft and measured, that blended with the natural harmonics of the underwater world. The day unfolded as a series of gentle adventures, each connected by the subtle currents of friendship, observation, and curiosity. By midday, the light had deepened, casting golden patches across the sand and corals. Pearl paused to watch the patterns, letting the sunlight play across her scales, shimmering in soft pinks, golds, and corals. The simple act of observation became a meditation, connecting her more deeply to the rhythm of the ocean and the pulse of life around her. She noticed the interplay of shadow and light, the delicate arcs of passing fish, and the gentle undulations of the kelp forest. Each was a thread in the tapestry of her day, a melody in the quiet symphony of the underwater world. The friends continued their gentle wanderings, exploring smaller nooks of the town, where currents converged in swirling patterns and tiny hidden creatures darted through crevices. Pearl led the way with calm assurance, observing the interplay of movement, light, and shadow. Though she never spoke her thoughts aloud, the rhythm of her actions communicated her understanding: to move slowly, to observe deeply, to cherish every small wonder. As afternoon approached, the group drifted toward the edges of the town, where the coral gardens thickened and the water deepened into soft blues. Here, the ocean carried a different resonance, slower, deeper, richer, with the hum of distant currents. Pearl glided through these waters with a quiet confidence, sensing the life forms that existed just beyond view, noting their patterns, their interactions, and the gentle order that held them in place. The day felt endless, yet unhurried, full of possibility yet anchored by the calm, predictable rhythms of nature. Throughout the day, Pearl discovered not only the physical wonders of her world, but also the subtle truths of friendship. Being present, moving with care, observing without imposing, and harmonizing with the rhythms of others brought a sense of connection deeper than words could convey. Her companions mirrored her movements, slowed their motions, and discovered their own moments of quiet wonder, guided by her calm example. By late afternoon, the currents carried the first hints of evening light, softening the colors of the ocean floor and the coral reefs. Pearl and her friends drifted homeward, moving with the gentle tug of the tides. The town settled into calm, the sounds softened, and the ocean itself seemed to breathe in the collective sigh of a day well lived. Pearl paused at her home's threshold, feeling the pulse of the ocean, the steady presence of her father's care, and the soft glow of light filtering through the water. Evenings were for reflection. Pearl would drift through her cozy coral home, running her fins along familiar surfaces, feeling the textures of shells, stones, and corals. She thought of the day's small adventures, the hidden wonders she had found, and the quiet bonds of friendship nurtured through shared observation and presence. The currents themselves seemed to hum a lullaby, carrying her toward rest with the gentle assurance of continuity, safety, and belonging. As night descended fully, the soft shadows of the ocean enveloped her home. Tiny particles drifted lazily through the water, and the faint glimmers of distant creatures illuminated the darkness like scattered stars. Pearl settled among her coral furnishings, fins floating lazily, and reflected on the lessons of the day: patience, harmony, observation, and the quiet joy of being present. The rhythm of Bikini Bottom, her friendships, and her gentle adventures coalesced into a lullaby that carried her into the calm embrace of sleep. And so, the life of Pearl Krabs continued, filled with gentle exploration, quiet companionship, and the subtle wonders of an underwater world that moved in harmony with her heart. Each day offered new discoveries. Each current carried a soft lesson, and each friendship reflected the calm, patient rhythm of her world. Through these gentle adventures, she learned that life, at its quietest, held the deepest meaning, and that even in stillness, there was infinite beauty to be observed and cherished. Morning light drifted lazily through the waters of Bikini Bottom, soft and muted, casting patterns of gentle gold and coral across the sands and coral homes. Pearl Krabs stirred from her rest, her fins brushing softly against her familiar surroundings. The ocean around her hummed quietly, carrying with it the subtle rhythms of life, the distant sway of kelp, the faint echo of fish moving along sandy pathways, and the soft pulse of water currents guiding her through another day. Today was a day for learning, a day where the world would present both subtle challenges and quiet joys. Pearl moved with deliberate grace through her home, taking a moment to observe the small treasures that adorn the coral walls. Smooth shells, polished by currents, small stones, etched with intricate patterns, and the occasional gift from her father, placed with care and pride. These objects, seemingly ordinary, carried lessons of attention, patience, and observation, shaping her understanding of her world before she even left the house. Breakfast was simple, as it always was, yet filled with intention. Pearl carefully selected morsels from the surrounding waters: soft seaweed, tiny clams, and a few small crustaceans that had settled among coral crevices. Each bite was taken with mindfulness, a gentle acknowledgement of the ocean's generosity and the quiet sustenance it provided. She moved slowly, savoring textures, flavors, and the gentle rhythm of the currents around her. In these early moments of the day, she felt a sense of harmony and balance, a readiness for the lessons awaiting her. After breakfast, Pearl glided toward the town's school, a modest structure built into a coral ridge. The pathways along the way were familiar, yet they never lost their subtle charm. Soft ripples in the sand, created by passing fish, sunbeams filtering through the water, and the gentle sway of coral and kelp in the currents. Each step, or rather each glide, was an exercise in awareness, a practice in patience, and a reminder that even familiar paths held small surprises for those who observed closely. The school itself was alive, with quiet motion. Young fish moved through lessons and activities, guided by their teachers' patient instruction. Pearl joined them in careful observation, not hurried, not anxious, but fully present. Today, she would practice lessons in arithmetic and observation, learning to measure the flow of sand through an hourglass, to trace the arcs of swimming currents, and to note the subtle interactions between moving creatures in controlled experiments. Each activity, though simple, carried profound lessons in patience, focus, and the gentle application of knowledge. Pearl found joy not only in the lessons themselves, but also in the quiet camaraderie of her classmates. They moved together through tasks, each contributing in small ways to a shared understanding of the world around them. Pearl's presence brought a sense of calm and observation to their activities. She did not rush, did not urge, but allowed the natural rhythms of cooperation and learning to unfold. guiding others through the gentle influence of her example. After morning lessons, the students were led outdoors to the coral gardens surrounding the school. Here, the ocean expanded in depth and complexity. Towering coral structures, hidden crevices, and shifting currents created an environment ripe for exploration and learning. Pearl glided among the coral, tracing her fins along smooth surfaces, feeling the subtle vibrations of tiny creatures hidden within, and observing patterns of movement, light, and shadow that danced across the ocean floor. The lessons of the day often blended seamlessly with play. Pearl and her classmates learned the current's patterns by racing gently along natural pathways, noticing how water flowed over sand ridges and around coral obstacles. They practiced patience by observing hidden creatures, waiting quietly to see a shy crab emerge from a crevice, or a school of tiny fish swirl in unison. Play and learning were intertwined, each reinforcing the other in subtle, harmonious ways. During mid-afternoon, a gentle current carried Pearl and her friends to a quieter area of the gardens, where the light filtered through a dense canopy of kelp. Here, they practiced stillness, learning to harmonize with the ocean's rhythm. Pearl felt the currents brush her fins softly, the gentle pulse of the water carrying a sense of calm, and the small vibrations of life surrounding her, creating a symphony of subtle guidance. She observed the smallest details, the way sand shifted with the passing of a tiny fish, the reflection of light on a floating shell, and the delicate sway of kelp in synchronized motion with distant currents. By late afternoon, lessons gave way to reflection. Pearl and her classmates gathered along a soft patch of sandy floor, sharing what they had observed without words, using gestures and gentle signals to communicate their insights. Pearl's observations were subtle yet profound. The interplay of movement and stillness, the gentle patterns of growth and adaptation, and the quiet resilience of creatures large and small. Each reflection was a meditation, a way to integrate learning into her being, and a reinforcement of the patience and care she practiced daily. As the sun's filtered light softened into the muted glow of evening, Pearl glided back toward her home, following familiar currents that guided her safely through the town. The streets of Bikini Bottom had quieted, the sounds of activity settling into gentle rhythms. Coral and kelp swayed in the soft currents, small creatures found repose in hidden crevices, and the ocean seemed to breathe slowly, carrying a sense of completion and calm. Evenings were reserved for quiet connection with her father. Mr. Krabs, though often absorbed in the details of his business, welcomed these moments of togetherness. Pearl would drift near him, observing his careful motions, feeling the warmth and steadiness of his presence, and allowing the unspoken bond between father and daughter to resonate in subtle harmony. These moments were never rushed, never forced. They existed as gentle affirmations of care, trust, and connection. Finally, as night settled fully over the gentle town, Pearl returned to her coral home. Tiny particles drifted lazily through the water, reflecting the faint glow of distant lights and bioluminescent creatures. Pearl rested among her familiar furnishings, reflecting on the day's lessons, small adventures, and quiet connections. She felt the soft pulse of the currents, the gentle hum of life surrounding her, and the steady presence of family and friends woven into her existence. With fins folded gently, eyes half closed, and scales catching the muted light, Pearl surrendered to the soft lullaby of the ocean. The day's teachings, friendships, and gentle adventures carried her toward rest, preparing her for the rhythm of tomorrow. In the stillness of her home, she understood the subtle truths her father had long embodied: patience, observation, care, and the quiet joy of life lived with presence and harmony. Thus, Pearl's life continued, a delicate balance of learning, play, reflection, and connection. Each day brought new discoveries, each lesson offered gentle insight, and every current whispered reminders of the infinite beauty and rhythm of Bikini Bottom. Through these quiet moments, Pearl Krabs grew not only in knowledge, but also in awareness, grace, and the enduring patience that would guide her throughout her days in the tranquil embrace of the underwater world. The morning in Bikini Bottom began with a delicate hush. Sunlight, filtered through the gentle layers of water above, scattered across the coral in soft, dancing patterns. Pearl Krabs stirred slowly from her rest, her scales catching the muted light and shimmering softly in shades of pink and coral. The ocean around her was alive with subtle motion. Currents rippled over sand, tiny fish flitted through coral gardens, and the quiet hum of life created a steady, comforting rhythm. Today promised exploration beyond her usual paths, a day of subtle adventures in the quiet corners of her world. Pearl moved with deliberate grace through her home, pausing to run her fins over familiar surfaces. The smooth texture of coral, the soft sway of kelp curtains, and the gentle vibration of tiny shells lining the walls offered her a sense of continuity and calm. Each morning ritual, from rising to preparing a simple breakfast, grounded her in the rhythm of the day. The ocean itself seemed to acknowledge her presence, nudging her along with subtle currents that carried both direction and gentle encouragement. Breakfast was quiet and deliberate. Pearl selected soft seaweed, small clams, and delicate crustaceans from nearby coral nooks. Each morsel was savored slowly, with an appreciation for texture, flavor, and the ocean's quiet generosity. She ate not in haste, but in awareness, letting the currents of life carry nourishment to her fins, letting each bite become a soft meditation on existence. The simplicity of the act, the gentle cadence of her movements, and the harmony with the surrounding waters prepared her for the explorations that awaited. After breakfast, Pearl set out toward the edges of Bikini Bottom she rarely visited. Today, she intended to explore the less traveled paths of coral gardens, sandy ridges, and hidden nooks along the outskirts of town. The currents guided her, carrying her smoothly over sand and around coral formations. Each movement was attentive, precise, and unhurried, allowing her to observe small wonders that often went unnoticed. A tiny crab scuttled across a sunlit ridge. A school of fish spiraled gracefully through the water. The sunlight glinted off a smooth pink shell, partially buried in the sand. Pearl paused at each detail, letting her awareness soak in the quiet richness of her world. The coral gardens offered corridors of mystery. Pearl glided through archways, past delicate anemones, and around hidden crevices where tiny creatures darted in and out. The currents whispered as they flowed around the structures, carrying subtle vibrations that Pearl felt along her fins. She followed these cues with care, curious about where each might lead, and aware that even in familiar places, small shifts of perspective could reveal new experiences. Pearl's friends soon joined her, drawn by the promise of discovery. Their presence added subtle energy to the currents, not in noise or haste, but in shared attention and gentle curiosity. Together, they moved through the hidden corners of the ocean, following the interplay of light and shadow, exploring the natural mazes formed by coral and sand. Each discovery, whether a glinting shell, a hidden nook, or a softly swaying kelp cluster, became a quiet adventure, unfolding at a pace dictated by observation rather than urgency. The group found a shallow cavern, partially obscured by a cluster of tall coral. Sunlight filtered through the water above, creating patterns of golden light that danced across the sandy floor. Pearl paused at the entrance, feeling the subtle currents shift as she peered into the space. Tiny fish darted in and out, casting fleeting shadows on the walls. The cavern was a quiet world within the larger ocean, a place where life unfolded in concentrated, delicate rhythms. Pearl guided her friends slowly through the space, showing them how to move with attention, how to observe without disturbing, and how to harmonize with the natural patterns of the water. Beyond the cavern, the group discovered a gently flowing current, leading to an unusual sandy ridge. Pearl followed the flow, her fins brushing lightly against the water, feeling the energy and direction of the movement. Along the ridge, small clams nestled between rocks, and tiny shells shimmered faintly as they reflected the soft light. Pearl noticed patterns in the sand, created by previous movements of creatures, subtle traces of activity that spoke of unseen lives. She shared these observations through gestures, teaching her companions to see without words, to notice the hidden harmonies in the currents, and to appreciate the quiet artistry of the ocean's floor. As midday approached, the currents led them to a shallow meadow where jellyfish pulsed slowly in the water. Their gentle bioluminescence cast soft-colored shadows across the sand. Pearl observed the rhythm of their movements, noting how they flowed with the currents rather than resisting them. She guided her friends to move alongside the creatures, not to chase or interfere, but to harmonize with the natural patterns, allowing their fins to glide in time with the gentle pulses. This unspoken lesson in patience and presence deepened their understanding of subtle cooperation and the quiet joy of synchrony. The group continued to explore through hidden corridors, soft ridges, and calm pools, each discovery a small adventure, each moment a meditation. Pearl found delight in noticing textures of coral, the shimmer of tiny fish, the gentle sway of kelp in currents, and the intricate patterns left by sand and shells. She taught her friends not with instruction, but through example, demonstrating that exploration could be both active and gentle, and that observation carried its own reward. By late afternoon, the group began returning homeward, guided by familiar currents. Pearl paused frequently, savoring the soft golden light filtering through the water, and noticing details that might otherwise be overlooked. The reflection of sunlight off a smooth shell, the quiet motion of a hidden crab, the subtle pulse of a current weaving through coral. Each pause reinforced the day's quiet lessons: patience, observation, harmony, and the gentle thrill of discovery. Back near the center of Bikini Bottom, Pearl separated from her friends and glided through the quiet streets toward her coral home. The town had settled into calm. Soft shadows stretched across the sandy floor, and tiny creatures found shelter among coral nooks. Pearl moved with care, reflecting on the day's explorations and the quiet joy of shared discovery. Her presence was a gentle reminder that the smallest adventures, when approached with patience and awareness, carried profound lessons and subtle beauty. Evening approached, and the water dimmed to soft shades of blue. Pearl drifted into her home, running her fins along familiar surfaces, feeling textures and vibrations that carried a sense of comfort and stability. She paused to reflect on her adventures, the hidden corners of the ocean she had explored, and the unspoken bonds strengthened through shared curiosity and attention. The currents hummed gently around her, echoing the quiet rhythm of life, and she allowed herself to drift into calm reflection. As night settled fully, Pearl nestled among her coral furnishings. Tiny particles floated lazily through the water, reflecting faint bioluminescent glimmers in soft, scattered patterns. She rested her fins, eyes half closed, and let the gentle pulse of the ocean lull her toward sleep. The day's adventures, subtle discoveries, and quiet friendships carried her through the currents of reflection into the soft embrace of rest. And so Pearl's life continued. Each day, a delicate interplay of curiosity, patience, and gentle exploration. The ocean around her whispered in currents and light. The hidden corners offered small wonders, and the quiet friendships she nurtured added richness to her days. Through these gentle adventures, Pearl Krabs grew in awareness, grace, and the enduring patience that defined her world beneath the tranquil waves of Bikini Bottom. Morning arrived gently over Bikini Bottom, the sunlight sifting through layers of water, creating soft patterns across coral formations and sandy streets. Pearl Krabs stirred slowly, her fins brushing against the smooth surfaces of her home. The currents carried whispers of life outside, the faint hum of distant fish, the sway of kelp in subtle motion, and the gentle pulse of the town waking to the rhythm of the ocean. Today was not a day for play alone. Today held subtle lessons in responsibility, woven quietly into the currents of her world. Breakfast remained a mindful ritual. Pearl selected her morsels carefully: small clams, delicate seaweed, and tiny crustaceans. Each bite was savored slowly, an acknowledgement of the ocean's generosity and the rhythm of sustenance. She paused often, allowing herself to feel the gentle flow of water around her, noticing how sunlight fractured across the sand, and appreciating the quiet steadiness of her home. In these calm beginnings, she found the clarity and patience she would need for the responsibilities of the day. After eating, Pearl glided toward the Krusty Krab, her father's domain, where the familiar hum of work awaited. Mr. Krabs, ever diligent, had already begun his morning preparations. The registers clinked, pans clattered gently, and the scent of fresh patties began to drift across the currents. Pearl observed silently from a distance, noting each precise movement of her father's claws and each careful motion of his employees. Though she had watched many mornings before, today was different. Today, she would begin to participate in small, deliberate tasks under his quiet guidance. Her first responsibility was subtle yet meaningful: assisting with inventory, learning to recognize patterns in the supply of ingredients and the needs of the restaurant. Pearl moved slowly, counting crates of seaweed and stacks of patties, noting the variations in size and shape. Each task required attention and patience. Her father, from a distance, monitored her work, occasionally offering a guiding gesture or gentle encouragement. In these moments, Pearl understood that responsibility was not merely about doing, but about observing, anticipating, and acting with care. Afterward, she helped to organize simple items for the day: cleaning surfaces, arranging trays, and ensuring small spaces were tidy. Each motion was deliberate, a reflection of the lessons she had absorbed from her father's meticulous approach. She discovered that responsibility was both an inward and outward practice, one that required focus, consistency, and the ability to harmonize with the movements of others. Pearl felt the satisfaction of contributing, the gentle pride that accompanied purposeful action, and the deep connection with her father through shared diligence. The mid-morning currents carried Pearl outside briefly, where she paused to reflect on her role in the larger town. Tiny creatures moved in and out of coral. Nooks, fish swirled in small schools, and the soft hum of distant activity reminded her of the interconnectedness of all life. Responsibility, she realized, was not limited to her tasks at the Krusty Krab. It extended into the subtle ways she interacted with the world, the awareness she brought to each motion, and the gentle attention she paid to even the smallest details. After returning, Pearl joined her father in the kitchen for another quiet lesson. He demonstrated, with careful movements, the preparation of a signature Krabby Patty. Pearl observed the alignment of ingredients, the timing required for cooking, and the delicate motions that ensured each patty was perfect. Though she was not yet ready to take over the task fully, she practiced alongside him, replicating each motion with careful attention. The exercise was both practical and meditative, reinforcing the discipline of focus, patience, and mindful care. The afternoon brought a quieter form of responsibility: caring for small creatures near the restaurant. Pearl gently observed and tended to tiny fish, helping them find safe spaces within the coral nooks and ensuring that smaller crustaceans had shelter. Each act was deliberate and unhurried, requiring empathy and understanding. She moved slowly, harmonizing her motions with the rhythm of the water, noticing subtle signals from the creatures she cared for. In this, Pearl experienced the deeper meaning of responsibility, not as duty alone, but as a gentle stewardship of life. Later, the sun's light softened as currents carried Pearl to a nearby stretch of coral gardens. where she practiced patience by observing hidden life. Tiny crabs, inconspicuous snails, and small schools of fish all moved in their own patterns. Pearl's task was to watch, learn, and sometimes guide, never disturbing the natural order, but gently supporting those who might need her care. Each interaction, however subtle, reinforced the lessons of observation, attentiveness, and calm influence. Evenings at the Krusty Krab offered another layer of responsibility, quiet preparation for the next day. Pearl moved alongside her father, helping organize ingredients and utensils, ensuring that every space was ready for the morning. Mr. Krabs, though absorbed in his work, acknowledged her presence with a quiet smile or a nod, teaching without words the profound connection between effort, diligence, and care. Pearl absorbed these lessons in silence, understanding that responsibility carried both visible and invisible rewards. As night approached, Pearl returned to her coral home, where the currents whispered softly through the kelp curtains and shells lining her walls. She reflected on the day's lessons, feeling the gentle satisfaction of meaningful work and the quiet connection she shared with her father. Responsibility, she understood, was more than tasks or duties. It was a way of being, a gentle alignment with the rhythm of the world, and a mindful participation in the flow of life. Finally, as the ocean darkened into soft, muted blues and distant bioluminescent glimmers danced across the sands, Pearl settled among her familiar coral furnishings. She let her fins drift lazily, eyes half closed, and allowed the gentle hum of the currents to carry her toward rest. The lessons of the day, the subtleties of responsibility, the quiet joys of contribution, and the deep bond with her father mingled with the lullaby of the ocean, guiding her into a peaceful sleep. And so, Pearl's life continued, a delicate interplay of gentle duties, quiet care, and the steady rhythm of parental guidance. Each day brought new lessons, each task offered subtle insights, and every interaction strengthened her awareness, patience, and grace. Through these calm responsibilities, Pearl Krabs grew into the gentle steward of her world, her life flowing in harmony with the tranquil currents of Bikini Bottom. Morning light drifted through the ocean above Bikini Bottom, gentle and dappled, painting soft patterns across the sand and coral structures. Pearl Krabs awoke slowly, feeling the subtle hum of the currents and the faint pulse of life surrounding her. Today, unlike other days, carried a quiet anticipation, a sense of independence and discovery that stirred softly within her, calling her to venture beyond the familiar routines and into the hidden corners of her world. Pearl moved deliberately through her home, brushing her fins along smooth coral walls, letting the textures and contours settle her mind. Her breakfast was quiet and intentional, chosen with care from the ocean's abundant offerings: delicate seaweed, tender clams, and tiny crustaceans. Each bite was savored slowly, allowing her to feel the rhythm of the currents and the subtle warmth of filtered sunlight across her scales. Even these morning rituals, simple though they were, reinforced her awareness and patience, preparing her for the day's first independent explorations. With the morning currents guiding her, Pearl glided out of her coral home and into the streets of Bikini Bottom. The town stirred softly around her. Small fish wove through the sand. The distant hum of the Krusty Krab mingled with the gentle sway of kelp, and sunlight shimmered through the water in scattered dancing beams. Today, she would explore without the watchful presence of her father, navigating her environment with the careful attention that had been nurtured through years of observation, guidance, and gentle instruction. Her first destination was a coral maze near the outskirts of town, a quiet area she had observed before, but never fully explored alone. Pearl moved slowly, her fins tracing the soft contours of sand ridges, brushing against delicate coral formations, and following currents that twisted in unexpected ways. Every turn offered the possibility of small discoveries: a hidden shell glinting faintly in the sunlight, a tiny crab scuttling along a shaded ridge, or the soft ripple of sand shifting beneath her fins. Each observation became a meditation, connecting her more deeply with the rhythm of her world. The coral maze was alive with subtle motion. Tiny fish flitted through crevices. Jellyfish pulsed faintly in hidden pockets of light, and delicate kelp swayed in gentle arcs. Pearl moved alongside these rhythms, harmonizing her movements with the environment. She noticed patterns she had never observed before: how currents shifted slightly around coral spires, how sand moved in spirals after a small disturbance, and how light refracted differently in shaded corners. These subtle observations offered both a sense of wonder and the quiet confidence of mastery over her own attention. After some time in the coral maze, Pearl followed a gentle current that led her toward a quiet lagoon. Here, the water deepened slightly, and the light filtered through in long, soft beams. Tiny creatures moved about in their own delicate routines, and the muted colors of the sands and corals created a tranquil palette. Pearl paused frequently, feeling the gentle tug of the currents on her fins, noting the interplay between movement and stillness. She allowed herself to drift slowly, letting the ocean guide her exploration while maintaining awareness of the subtle details all around. In the lagoon, Pearl discovered a small, hidden grove of sea plants she had not noticed before. The plants swayed rhythmically with the current, and small fish sought shelter among the stalks. She observed the subtle interactions of the creatures within the grove, the way a tiny crab navigated the roots, the synchronized flicker of a school of fish, the gentle bend of stalks as currents passed through. Pearl moved gently among them, careful not to disturb the delicate balance, learning through quiet observation the lessons that only independence could offer: patience, respect, and the joy of God. Discovery unassisted. Midday approached, and Pearl followed the currents toward a nearby sand ridge that formed a natural path between her home and deeper coral formations. Along this path, she found a collection of shells, each unique in color, texture, and shape. She paused to examine them, noting the subtle differences: a spiral shell with faint pink hues, a flat, smooth shell etched with tiny grooves, and a piece of sea glass worn perfectly by the tides. These small treasures became her meditation, a quiet reflection of the beauty inherent in the smallest elements of the ocean. As the afternoon currents carried her further, Pearl discovered a gently flowing stream between coral spires. Tiny bubbles floated upward, carrying light reflections that danced across the nearby sand. Pearl moved carefully along this stream, following its twists and turns, observing the life it supported: tiny shrimp darting among rocks, small fish taking shelter in the overhangs, and delicate strands of kelp swaying in harmony with the water's pulse. The exploration offered her both independence and profound connection, a sense that the world could be navigated with care, attention, and quiet joy. Eventually, Pearl's journey led her to a small cove near the outskirts of town, a quiet retreat where sunlight pierced through water in soft golden beams. She paused, letting her fins drift lazily as she absorbed the calm and solitude. The gentle pulse of the ocean, the rhythm of small creatures moving unseen, and the soft interplay of light and shadow created a sanctuary for reflection. Here, Pearl understood the depth of independence, the ability to explore, observe, and learn without guidance, while remaining connected to the harmony of her world. The currents carried her home as evening approached, guiding her gently through the quieter streets of Bikini Bottom. Soft shadows stretched across the sand, the hum of distant activity slowed, and the ocean seemed to breathe in collective calm. Pearl moved with gentle purpose, reflecting on her day of exploration, the subtle discoveries she had made, and the quiet confidence she had gained. Her first independent adventures had not been loud or dramatic, but they carried profound lessons in patience, attentiveness, and harmony with her surroundings. Back at her coral home, Pearl settled among her familiar furnishings, letting her fins drift lazily as the soft bioluminescence of nearby creatures cast gentle glows across the room. She reflected on the day. The coral maze, the hidden lagoon, the stream, and the quiet cove all held lessons in independence, observation, and the subtle joy of discovery. Each adventure had strengthened her confidence, deepened her awareness, and nurtured the gentle curiosity that defined her nature. As night settled over Bikini Bottom, Pearl allowed herself to sink fully into calm. Tiny particles drifted lazily through the water, reflecting faint glimmers of distant light. She rested among her coral walls, feeling the pulse of the currents and the quiet presence of the world around her. The lessons of independence, the rhythm of discovery, and the joy of quiet exploration carried her gently toward rest. And so, Pearl's life continued, a careful balance of curiosity, observation, and gentle adventure. Each day offered the possibility of new discoveries. Each current whispered subtle guidance, and each hidden corner revealed the quiet wonders of her underwater world. Through these early independent adventures, Pearl Krabs learned the power of attention, patience, and the joy of moving through life with quiet confidence, flowing in harmony with the soft, endless currents of Bikini Bottom. Morning arrived in Bikini Bottom with a quiet serenity. Sunlight filtered through the gentle waves, scattering soft beams across the sand, corals, and kelp forests. Pearl Krabs stirred from her slumber slowly, feeling the familiar hum of the currents around her and the subtle vibrations of life in the town. Today, there was a sense of anticipation in the water, a feeling she could not yet name, a whisper of discovery, and a gentle challenge that would unfold in the hours ahead. She moved through her coral home with measured grace, letting her fins brush against familiar surfaces and her eyes trace the soft curves of her surroundings. Breakfast, simple and deliberate as always, became a quiet meditation. She selected soft seaweed, small clams, and delicate crustaceans, savoring each bite with awareness. The ritual carried a sense of grounding, preparing her for the subtle lessons hidden within the currents of the day. Pearl had learned that in the ocean, as in life, even the smallest ripple could carry meaning, and the day ahead seemed full of them. The currents guided her out of the home and toward a nearby lagoon, a place she had explored before but never fully understood. The water was calm, shimmering in soft golden tones from the filtered sunlight above. Fish darted lazily among the coral, and tiny bubbles drifted upward, reflecting muted light like suspended jewels. Pearl glided with care, attentive to the soft pulses of life around her, feeling a gentle excitement mingle with the calm familiarity of her environment. As she reached a shallow bend in the lagoon, Pearl noticed something unusual, a sudden shift in the current, subtle yet perceptible. Tiny particles swirled unexpectedly, and a faint shadow moved along the sand. She paused, observing carefully. The shadow belonged to a small, lost sea creature, a juvenile crab, smaller even than the ones she often watched near the coral gardens. It scuttled frantically, unsure of the current, and separated from its home. Pearl felt a surge of empathy and curiosity simultaneously, aware that she could intervene, but needing to do so with patience and gentle care. She approached slowly, letting her fins move in smooth arcs that harmonized with the water. The small crab froze momentarily, sensing her presence, then resumed its tentative movements. Pearl guided it with careful currents, nudging sand gently to provide a clear path while ensuring the little creature was not frightened. Every motion was deliberate, measured, and aligned with the natural rhythm of the ocean. This was a lesson in caution, attention, and the subtle power of gentle guidance, a form of responsibility that required awareness without interference. As she assisted the small crab, Pearl became aware of her own heartbeat, or at least the faint internal rhythm that mirrored the pulse of the ocean. There was excitement, yes, but it was tempered by care. She moved slowly, watching the creature's reactions, noting how it responded to shifts in current and shadow. In these small moments, Pearl learned the depth of trust, that it could be earned with patience, not demanded, and that guidance could be given with kindness, not force. The creature eventually found a tiny crevice beneath a coral overhang, safe from the larger currents and sheltered from potential predators. Pearl paused to watch it settle, noticing how it tucked itself into a snug nook among soft sand and coral. Relief and quiet joy flowed through her as she drifted back slightly, realizing that even small acts of attention could have meaningful consequences. The currents resumed their gentle rhythm around her, and Pearl allowed herself a slow, deliberate glide through the lagoon, feeling the sense of accomplishment without any need for fanfare. Further along, the water deepened slightly, revealing soft shadows of swaying kelp and hidden coral gardens. Pearl followed the current, moving carefully, aware now that small surprises could emerge anywhere. A sudden swirl of sand revealing a hidden shell, a tiny fish darting unexpectedly, or a floating bubble reflecting sunlight in ways that momentarily dazzled. Each encounter reminded her that caution and awareness were as important as curiosity and exploration, and that the ocean was a place where attention could both protect and reveal. By midday, Pearl arrived at a quiet meadow where sunlight filtered through tall kelp stalks. The gentle sway of the plants and the soft rustle of tiny creatures created a symphony of calm, punctuated by the occasional flicker of movement in the sand. Here, she practiced mindful observation, noting how the currents interacted with the kelp, how shadows shifted over sand ripples, and how small creatures responded to the subtle vibrations of the water. The lessons of the morning, the value of gentle guidance and careful attention, carried into every movement she made. Pearl's reflections were interrupted by a soft disturbance in the sand nearby. A small, frightened fish had become trapped in a shallow depression, unable to navigate the tiny ridges formed by shifting currents. Pearl approached slowly, letting her fins move in harmonious arcs, guiding water in a subtle, gentle push. The fish gradually freed itself, darting safely into a shadowed nook of coral. Pearl paused to watch it settle, realizing that even the smallest interventions required patience, timing, and respect for the natural flow. Afternoon light brought a deeper calm. Pearl drifted through the lagoon with slow, measured strokes, reflecting on the day's experiences. She understood now that independence came with responsibility, and that small challenges offered lessons in trust, caution, and empathy. The subtle surprises of the ocean, shifts in currents, hidden creatures, and unexpected shadows were not obstacles, but teachers, guiding her growth and shaping her understanding of the world. As the sun began to filter through the water, at softer angles, Pearl glided toward home, following familiar currents. The town had quieted. The sands were patterned by gentle swirls of fish and shell, and the distant hum of the crusty crab faded into calm. Pearl reflected on her father's teachings, realizing that the lessons of care, diligence, and observation extended naturally into moments like these. Independence was not simply freedom, it was a harmony with life, a measured participation that honored the rhythm of the ocean. Back in her coral home, Pearl settled among familiar furnishings. Her fins drifted lazily as she reflected on the subtle surprises and challenges of the day. The small acts of guidance she had offered, the careful observation of hidden creatures, and the attention to shifting currents reinforced the quiet power of responsibility. Each lesson, though understated, carried profound meaning, shaping her understanding of herself and her world. As night descended, soft, bioluminescent glimmers danced through her home, and the ocean's currents whispered lullabies through the kelp and coral. Pearl rested among the familiar textures of her surroundings, feeling the gentle pulse of life around her and the quiet satisfaction of lessons learned. The experiences of the day, subtle yet impactful, carried her into calm reflection and finally into a peaceful, restorative sleep. And so Pearl's life continued to unfold, a balance of curiosity, cautious exploration, and gentle guidance. Through subtle surprises and small challenges, she grew in confidence, empathy, and awareness, learning that the quiet currents of Bikini Bottom carried lessons as deep and meaningful as any grand adventure. Morning light shimmered softly through the water above Bikini Bottom, scattering gentle patterns across coral walls and sandy pathways. Pearl Krabs stirred from her sleep, her fins brushing against familiar textures in her coral home. The currents carried faint whispers of life outside, small fish moving in arcs, distant hums of activity in the town, and the soft sway of kelp in the gentle morning tides. Today, Pearl's thoughts lingered on the bonds she had begun to form, the friendships that had quietly shaped her world, and the subtle lessons she learned from the creatures she spent her days alongside. Her morning routine remained deliberate and peaceful. Pearl selected a few pieces of soft seaweed, tender clams, and tiny crustaceans, savoring each bite with mindful attention. The rhythmic pulse of the currents around her, the subtle shimmer of sunlight, and the gentle presence of familiar surroundings created a sense of calm preparation for the day ahead. She reflected on the friends she had, those companions who shared quiet adventures and gentle play, and considered how even without words, connections could deepen through shared observation and presence. After breakfast, Pearl glided through the soft morning currents toward a quiet corner of Bikini Bottom, where her friends often gathered. The town was calm, streets patterned with the gentle swirls of sand shifted by currents and passing fish. Pearl approached slowly, attentive to the subtle signs of life, a ripple of movement indicating a nearby school of fish, the glimmer of shells tucked into crevices, and the gentle sway of kelp marking paths that currents naturally followed. These small details guided her, and in following them, she felt both connected to her surroundings and to the friends she sought. Her companions arrived in their own rhythms, each bringing subtle energy to the shared space. There were no loud greetings or hurried movements. Their bond was built on shared presence, gentle curiosity, and attentive observation. Together, they moved through coral gardens, tracing delicate patterns, noting hidden nooks, and observing the interactions of tiny creatures in their midst. The friendships Pearl cultivated were rooted not in noise or competition, but in synchronized exploration, in quiet respect for each other and the world around them. Pearl guided the group toward a shallow lagoon, where sunlight reflected off soft sands in gentle ripples. Tiny fish darted in and out of crevices, and kelp swayed rhythmically with the currents. Pearl encouraged her friends to pause, to notice the subtle shifts in light, the gentle vibrations of hidden creatures, and the movement of particles carried by flowing water. These shared observations became a form of communication, a quiet language of gestures and glances that conveyed curiosity, empathy, and wonder without the need for spoken words. In the lagoon, the friends discovered a collection of small, hidden shells, partially buried in sand. Each shell was unique, varying in shape, color, and texture. Pearl led her companions in a slow examination of these treasures, showing how to observe without disturbing, how to appreciate differences, and how to share discoveries without possession or hurry. The exercise was both playful and meditative, reinforcing lessons in patience, respect, and the quiet joy of communal exploration. As the currents shifted toward midday, the group moved deeper into the coral gardens. The pathways were intricate, twisting through arches and around spires of coral. Pearl taught, through example, the subtle art of moving in harmony with the environment, to glide with the current rather than against it, to sense the gentle vibrations of hidden life, and to notice details that often went unseen. Her friends mirrored her movements, learning the rhythm of attention, the calm of observation, and the gentle thrill of discovery that required both patience and care. The afternoon currents carried them to a shallow meadow where soft sunlight filtered through long stalks of kelp. Pearl encouraged moments of stillness here, allowing the group to float quietly, observing shadows, currents, and hidden creatures. The gentle sway of kelp, The flicker of light across sand ripples and the subtle pulse of the lagoon created a meditative symphony. In these moments, the friendships of Pearl's world deepened, not through words, but through shared awareness and presence. Each fin stroke, each pause, and each careful glance built trust and connection, strengthening bonds that were quiet yet profound. During these reflective periods, Pearl noticed how her companions responded to subtle shifts in the environment. A fish darting unexpectedly, a bubble rising from the sand, or a gentle ripple in the current. She guided them softly, showing that harmony came from observation and patience, not from force. These lessons extended beyond the environment itself, shaping the way they interacted with one another, fostering empathy, attentiveness, and an appreciation for the gentle rhythms that governed their underwater world. By late afternoon, the currents led the group toward a hidden cove near the edge of town, a quiet refuge where light filtered in soft golden beams. Here, Pearl and her friends paused for reflection, letting the water carry them gently while they observed the interplay of currents, shadows, and subtle movements of sand and coral. The cove became a sanctuary, a place for quiet meditation on both the world and their shared presence within it. Pearl realized that friendships, like currents, required attention, patience, and the willingness to move together in harmony rather than against each other. As the day waned, Pearl guided her friends homeward, following familiar currents that traced soft, meandering paths through the streets of Bikini Bottom. The town had grown quieter, the sand settled into gentle patterns, and the light softened into muted blues and golds. Each friend departed with a shared sense of calm, a silent acknowledgement of the day's explorations, and a deepened connection forged through gentle, attentive interaction. Back in her coral home, Pearl reflected on the lessons of the day. Friendships, she realized, were like the currents she navigated, subtle, flowing, and requiring care. They flourished not in loud gestures or hurried interactions, but in shared attention, empathy, and the quiet delight of observation. Her bonds with others mirrored the rhythm of life itself, a delicate interplay of presence, patience, and gentle connection. As night descended fully over Bikini Bottom, Pearl settled among familiar furnishings. Tiny particles floated lazily through the water, reflecting faint bioluminescent glimmers from nearby corals. Her fins drifted in the soft currents, and she allowed herself to absorb the lessons of the day, the quiet power of friendship, the strength of trust built through shared presence, and the beauty of gentle, unspoken communication. The ocean hummed a lullaby around her, guiding her into peaceful rest, her heart calm and full from the quiet adventures of connection. And so, Pearl's life continued. A careful balance of gentle exploration, attentive companionship, and reflective observation. Each day brought new friends, subtle lessons, and quiet opportunities for growth. Through these shared moments of presence and discovery, Pearl Krabs learned that the deepest bonds were often unspoken, thriving in the currents of patience, empathy, and harmony within the tranquil world of Bikini Bottom. Morning arrived in Bikini Bottom with the familiar hush of soft currents and filtered sunlight. Pearl Krabs awoke slowly, her fins brushing against the coral walls of her home. The ocean carried its usual symphony of muted vibrations, the faint hum of distant fish, the gentle sway of kelp, and the rhythmic pulse of currents weaving through the town. Today, however, felt subtly different. A sense of anticipation and quiet excitement hovered in the water. It was a day marked by celebration, a gentle gathering that would unfold slowly and harmoniously, teaching lessons in patience, community, and mindful joy. Pearl's morning routine was deliberate and calming. She selected soft seaweed, tender clams, and small crustaceans for breakfast, savoring each bite with awareness. As she ate, her thoughts drifted to the day ahead. Friends would gather, decorations would shimmer softly in the sunlight, and gentle laughter would ripple through the currents. Pearl, understood that celebrations in Bikini Bottom were not loud or chaotic, but quiet and deliberate, filled with the soft joy of togetherness and the subtle artistry of the ocean's colors and textures. After breakfast, Pearl moved through her home, preparing for the day. Tiny shells and soft coral pieces were gathered to decorate spaces where the gathering would take place. She arranged them carefully, noting the interplay of colors, textures, and the way light refracted through water around each object. Each placement was done slowly, mindfully, creating a harmonious environment where the ocean's natural beauty could shine. The act of preparation itself was meditative, a gentle exercise in attention and care. Currents guided her toward the gathering site, a quiet cove near the edge of Bikini Bottom. Sunlight filtered through the water, scattering in soft patterns across sand and coral. Pearl's friends arrived gradually, their fins moving in gentle arcs, their presence adding warmth to the serene space. Each newcomer brought small treasures, polished shells, strands of kelp arranged in flowing patterns, and soft, colorful stones from nearby ridges. Pearl greeted them with quiet acknowledgement, her own energy calm and steady, setting the tone for the gentle rhythm of the day. Together, they began to arrange the space, weaving kelp, shells, and coral pieces into soft patterns along the sandy floor. Each decoration was deliberate, reflecting the unique textures and colors of the surrounding environment. Pearl guided her friends gently, showing how to enhance natural beauty without disturbing the delicate balance of the lagoon. The process was slow, harmonious, and satisfying, each movement contributing to the shared aesthetic and reinforcing the value of cooperation and mindful presence. Mid-morning currents carried soft laughter through the water, mingling with the gentle hum of tiny creatures moving around them. Pearl and her friends floated together, observing the subtle interactions of the ocean. Schools of fish weaving in synchronized arcs, bubbles rising lazily and reflecting sunlight, and the delicate sway of kelp stalks. These small observations became part of the celebration itself, blending play with attention and delighting in the natural rhythms of the underwater world. As the day progressed, Pearl guided her companions through quiet activities, arranging shells into gentle patterns, following currents along hidden passages, and exploring shallow ridges where sunlight scattered in glittering arcs. Each activity was slow and deliberate, teaching patience, observation, and the joy of shared effort. Pearl noticed how each friend moved, adjusted, and responded to subtle cues, understanding that harmony in a gathering relied as much on awareness as on action. By midday, the lagoon glowed in soft shades of gold and blue as sunlight filtered through the water above. Pearl paused to admire the space. Decorations shimmered gently, shells and coral aligned in soft patterns, and the currents themselves seemed to flow in quiet synchrony. The gentle rhythm of life around them became a backdrop for connection, reflection, and shared appreciation. Friends swam quietly, observing, exchanging subtle gestures, and enjoying the serene beauty of their environment. In the afternoon, the celebration deepened with moments of rest and contemplation. Pearl and her friends settled into shaded corners of the lagoon, letting the water carry them slowly as they observed the interplay of light, shadow, and motion around them. Tiny fish flitted past, kelp swayed in rhythmic arcs, and distant currents pulsed softly, creating a meditative symphony. The quiet presence of friends, combined with the gentle environment, reinforced the subtle joy of togetherness, harmony, and reflection. Evening approached, softening the light to muted blues and gentle glimmers from bioluminescent creatures. Pearl guided her friends in tidying the space, ensuring that the natural balance of the lagoon remained undisturbed. Shells were returned to their crevices, kelp rearranged to its natural sway, and coral surfaces brushed lightly to maintain smooth textures. Each action was deliberate, a final meditation on responsibility, care, and appreciation for the environment in which their celebration had taken place. Finally, Pearl returned to her coral home, following the gentle currents of the evening. The town had quieted, Small creatures nested in their crevices, and the soft hum of life slowed into a tranquil rhythm. Pearl reflected on the day, the careful preparation, the slow and mindful activities, the laughter that traveled through currents, and the quiet moments of observation and connection. The celebration had been gentle yet profound, a lesson in joy, patience, and communal harmony. As night fully settled over Bikini Bottom, Pearl rested among her familiar furnishings. Her fins drifted lazily in the soft currents, and the glowing bioluminescence of nearby coral cast subtle reflections around her home. The lessons of the day, mindful cooperation, quiet joy, and shared appreciation lingered in her mind. Pearl allowed the gentle rhythm of the ocean to carry her into calm reflection, and finally into restorative sleep. And so, Pearl's life continued, a delicate balance of exploration, friendship, and mindful celebration. Each day offered subtle lessons in awareness, patience, and harmony with both the environment and those she cherished. Through these quiet, deliberate moments, Pearl Krabs learned that joy could be gentle, and that even celebrations, when approached with care and attention, could nurture calm, connection, and the quiet beauty of life in Bikini Bottom. Morning in Bikini Bottom arrived with the soft glow of sunlight filtering through the water, creating gentle ripples across coral spires and sandy pathways. Pearl Krabs awoke slowly, feeling the familiar hum of currents brushing softly against her fins and the quiet stirrings of life throughout the town. Today held a sense of intrigue, a subtle invitation to explore a mystery hidden within the gentle rhythms of her world. The ocean whispered hints, currents nudging her toward the unknown corners of her environment, promising discovery in soft, deliberate motions. Her morning routine remained a calm ritual. Pearl selected delicate seaweed, small clams, and tender crustaceans for breakfast, savoring each bite with awareness. She reflected quietly on the current's subtle cues, sensing a gentle tug toward a part of the ocean she had not fully explored. Even simple routines, she realized, carried the opportunity for mindful attention, and today would be a day to blend curiosity with patience, observation with careful movement. With measured grace, Pearl glided through the familiar streets of Bikini Bottom, following the current that led toward a quieter section of coral gardens. Tiny fish wove in and out of crevices, bubbles drifted lazily upward, and kelp swayed softly in the rhythm of the water. Each detail was a subtle clue, guiding her as if the ocean itself wished to teach her a secret. Pearl moved slowly, attentive to the patterns in the sand, the gentle vibrations of hidden creatures, and the way light fractured through the coral, illuminating spaces she had not noticed before. Her destination emerged gradually, a narrow passage partially hidden by tall coral spires. The entrance was subtle, easily overlooked, yet the currents nudged her forward with a gentle insistence. Pearl paused at the threshold, observing the shadowed space and feeling the delicate pulse of life within. Tiny creatures scuttled cautiously, their movements casting fleeting silhouettes. The interplay of light and shadow hinted at depth and texture beyond what could be seen at first glance. This subtle mystery invited both patience and careful attention, the hallmarks of Pearl's growing understanding of her world. As she entered the passage, Pearl noticed faint markings in the sand, delicate swirls and patterns created by currents, and the passage of small creatures. Each mark seemed purposeful, yet naturally formed, and Pearl moved alongside them slowly, tracing their arcs with her fins. Tiny shells lay partially hidden, glimmering softly in patches of filtered light, and small fish peeked out curiously from crevices. She realized that mysteries of the ocean often revealed themselves gradually, demanding observation rather than immediate action. Further into the passage, the space widened into a shallow cove with soft sands and gently undulating coral ridges. Here, the currents moved in subtle, twisting patterns, carrying particles and small creatures. along their pathways. Pearl floated slowly, letting the water guide her while she observed everything. The flicker of light across sand ripples, the sway of hidden kelp, and the tiny, cautious movements of crabs and shrimp. Each observation was a quiet dialogue with the environment, a meditation on patience and attention that revealed the hidden complexity of her world. In a corner of the cove, Pearl noticed a small cluster of unusual shells, partially buried in sand. Their colors were faintly iridescent, shifting gently in the filtered light. She paused, letting her fins hover, feeling the current's subtle tug, and observing how the surrounding life interacted with them. Tiny crabs and fish seemed drawn to the cluster, moving carefully among the shells. Pearl's mind noted each detail: the shape, texture, and orientation of the shells, the gentle patterns left in the sand, and the interplay of light and shadow. The mystery deepened, not in danger or chaos, but in quiet complexity, revealing that even the simplest objects could hold profound fascination. Curiosity led Pearl to examine a small crevice behind the shells. A faint vibration in the water suggested movement inside. She approached carefully, moving with deliberate slowness to avoid disturbing the creatures within. The crevice revealed a tiny school of fish nestled together, their bodies reflecting soft, muted colors in the filtered sunlight. Pearl watched, appreciating the delicate balance that allowed them to inhabit such a space. She understood that the ocean's mysteries were rarely solved with haste. They required harmony, attentiveness, and gentle respect. The currents carried her further along, revealing additional pockets of life within the cove. Small crabs emerged from hidden nooks, shells shimmered faintly, and tiny plants swayed in subtle, patterned arcs. Pearl followed the gentle flow, allowing herself to drift in rhythm with the water, observing and reflecting on each discovery. The ocean seemed to encourage mindfulness, rewarding patience with quiet insight and a deeper understanding of the interconnected life around her. By midday, Pearl settled in a patch of soft sand, letting the currents carry her slowly as she observed the intricate details of the cove. Patterns in the sand traced the movements of fish and currents. Tiny shells formed delicate arrangements, and beams of sunlight danced across coral surfaces. Pearl reflected on the day's discoveries, appreciating the quiet lessons in observation, patience, and gentle curiosity. Each small encounter, each subtle revelation, strengthened her understanding of the world and her place within it. As afternoon approached, Pearl traced her way back through the passage, moving with care to preserve the delicate balance she had observed. The currents guided her gently toward familiar parts of the coral gardens, and she noted the lingering traces of patterns she had uncovered earlier, realizing that mysteries often leave soft imprints for those who look closely. Her journey back was a meditation on harmony, respect, and the quiet joy of discovery unhurried. Evening light softened the water into muted blues and golden glimmers. Pearl returned to her coral home, reflecting on the day's experiences, the passage, the cove, the hidden shells, and the delicate patterns in sand and currents. She realized that curiosity, tempered by patience and respect, could transform ordinary spaces into landscapes of wonder. The ocean's mysteries were not puzzles to be solved in haste, but subtle invitations to observe, harmonize, and grow in awareness. Back at her familiar surroundings, Pearl settled among her coral furnishings. Tiny particles drifted lazily through the water, reflecting faint bioluminescent glows from nearby creatures. Her fins floated gently, and she allowed herself to rest fully, absorbing the day's lessons in quiet reflection. The subtle mysteries of the deep had offered not only insight, but a gentle reminder that attentiveness, patience, and respect could reveal the ocean's hidden beauty and complexity. As night fully descended, Pearl drifted into calm, feeling the currents wrap her softly and the quiet rhythm of life in Bikini Bottom lull her towards sleep. The lessons of observation, gentle curiosity, and patient exploration would remain with her, guiding her through each subsequent day. each adventure, and each quiet mystery that the ocean might present. And so, Pearl's life continued, an interplay of curiosity, reflection, and gentle discovery. Each day offered subtle mysteries, each current provided guidance, and each hidden corner held the potential for quiet revelation. Through these gentle explorations, Pearl Krabs learned that the ocean's depth was not measured by distance alone, but by the patience, attention, and reverence with which one engaged with the world around them. Morning broke gently over Bikini Bottom, the sunlight filtering through the water in long, soft beams that danced across the coral and sand. Pearl Krabs stirred slowly from her slumber, her fins brushing against the familiar textures of her coral home. The gentle hum of currents surrounded her, carrying the soft pulses of life throughout the town, the quiet movements of fish, the sway of kelp, and the distant clatter of the crusty crab preparing for the day. Today, Pearl's focus was on observation, a patient, deliberate exploration of the lives and rhythms of others in her underwater community. Her morning routine was calm and intentional. Pearl selected tender seaweed, small clams, and delicate crustaceans, savoring each bite in mindful awareness. As she ate, her mind drifted to the inhabitants of Bikini Bottom. She considered how each creature moved, the rhythms they followed, and the subtle ways their behavior intertwined with the currents, the corals, and the soft patterns of sand. Her intention was not to interact, but to watch quietly, to learn from the unfolding flow of life around her. After breakfast, Pearl glided through the familiar streets of Bikini Bottom, following soft currents that guided her toward the heart of the town. The streets were alive with subtle motion. Small fish darted through nooks, tiny crabs scuttled along sandy pathways, and distant shadows suggested creatures moving just beyond her line of sight. Pearl's fins traced slow, deliberate arcs, allowing her to maintain calm observation while remaining unobtrusive. She noticed how the currents themselves seemed to shift around active areas, creating spaces where life flowed with ease and balance. Pearl's first observation took place near the crusty crab. From a quiet distance, she watched her father and employees at work. Mr. Krabs moved with careful precision, each motion deliberate and purposeful. Employees arranged ingredients, cleaned surfaces, and attended to patrons with efficiency and attentiveness. Pearl noted the subtle choreography of tasks and motions, the way currents carried scent and movement, the rhythmic pulse of the kitchen, and the quiet interplay of cooperation and focus. She allowed herself to absorb these lessons silently, realizing that observation could teach as profoundly as participation. Leaving the bustling vicinity of the crusty crab, Pearl followed a current toward a quieter coral garden where smaller inhabitants of the town busied themselves with their daily routines. Tiny shrimps tended to clusters of algae, sand dollars moved slowly along ridges, and small schools of fish darted in arcs above the coral. Pearl paused frequently, noting the precision of their movements and the rhythm that governed their activities. She allowed her presence to blend with the environment, floating calmly while absorbing the gentle lessons offered by attentive observation. By midday, Pearl drifted toward a shallow lagoon, where soft sunlight filtered in golden beams. Here, she observed a school of jellyfish pulsing rhythmically in the current. Their motion was both independent and interconnected, a quiet dance that revealed balance, cooperation, and harmony within a simple structure. Pearl floated slowly, mirroring their gentle sway in small arcs, allowing her mind to trace patterns and understandings from the movement around her. This quiet meditation offered insight into the interconnectedness of life and the ways in which subtle patterns carried profound lessons. Continuing her observations, Pearl discovered a patch of sandy ridges where small crabs and mollusks moved about. She traced their paths with her fins, noting how they navigated the currents and the terrain, how they avoided obstacles, and how they communicated subtly with one another through movement. Pearl realized that every creature, no matter how small, contributed to the rhythm of the environment. Patience and attentiveness, she reflected, were essential not only for navigating her own life, but also for understanding the lives of others around her. In the afternoon, Pearl glided toward a hidden cove, observing the quieter moments of life that often went unnoticed. Tiny fish rested in crevices, shells shifted slowly with the gentle current, and delicate strands of kelp swayed in harmonic patterns. Pearl's focus was subtle. She moved slowly, avoided disturbing the environment, and allowed herself to become a part of the current's flow. She recognized that understanding was rooted in patience and gentle attention, and that even small, quiet observations could reveal profound truths about balance, cooperation, and the rhythms of life. As the day progressed, Pearl observed interactions among other young inhabitants of Bikini Bottom. She watched small gatherings of fish learning to navigate currents, crabs communicating through subtle gestures, and kelp gently shielding tiny creatures from the flow. These moments taught her that the ocean was full of lessons not explicitly stated, but revealed through observation, attentiveness, and reflection. She noted the importance of timing, the subtle cues that guided behavior, and the quiet elegance of life flowing in harmony with its surroundings. By late afternoon, Pearl returned to familiar streets, gliding slowly past sand ripples and coral formations, reflecting on her day of observation. The lessons she absorbed were delicate yet profound: patience, attentiveness, harmony, and the power of gentle awareness. Pearl recognized that the world's rhythm could be understood not only through action, but through mindful presence, quiet curiosity, and deep observation. Each creature, each movement, each shift of current offered insight into the hidden balance of life in Bikini Bottom. As evening approached, Pearl drifted back to her coral home, allowing the soft currents to carry her gently. The town had quieted. The light faded into muted blues, and glimmers of bioluminescence and small creatures settled into crevices. Pearl reflected on the day's lessons: how observation could nurture understanding, how patience could reveal subtle beauty, and how gentle attention could connect her to the rhythms of life around her. She felt a profound sense of calm, reinforced by the knowledge that each day offered opportunities to learn without rush, to appreciate without disturbance, and to observe without interference. Finally, Pearl settled among her familiar coral furnishings, letting her fins drift lazily in the soft currents. Tiny particles floated through the water, reflecting faint glimmers of light from surrounding coral and creatures. She allowed the gentle pulse of the ocean to lull her into quiet reflection. The lessons of the day, the interconnectedness of life, the elegance of natural patterns, and the importance of mindful observation mingled with the gentle rhythm of the currents, guiding her into peaceful, restorative sleep. And so, Pearl's life continued, a balance of exploration, observation, and subtle reflection. Each day offered insights hidden in the motions of others. Each current carried lessons in patience and harmony, and each quiet moment became an opportunity to understand the profound rhythms of life in Bikini Bottom. Through attentive observation, Pearl Krabs grew in awareness, empathy, and serenity, learning that the deepest understanding often comes not from action alone, but from the gentle act of watching and being present. Morning light filtered softly through the water above Bikini Bottom, scattering golden beams across coral walls and sandy pathways. Pearl Krabs awoke slowly, stretching her fins and letting the gentle currents brush against her. The town around her stirred quietly. Tiny fish navigated the streets, kelp swayed rhythmically, and distant hums from the crusty crab carried faintly through the water. Today promised a new kind of lesson, a gentle challenge that would test her patience, empathy, and understanding of the quiet rhythm of life around her. Her morning routine was deliberate and calming. Pearl selected delicate seaweed, tender clams, and small crustaceans for breakfast, savoring each bite with mindful awareness. As she ate, Her thoughts drifted toward her friends and the gentle adventures they often shared. Today, however, one small friend would need her help. A tiny creature caught in an unexpected situation, requiring both care and attention. Pearl felt a quiet mix of anticipation and calm determination, ready to approach the challenge slowly, without haste or disruption. After breakfast, Pearl glided through the streets of Bikini Bottom, following subtle currents that guided her toward the source of the gentle challenge. The town appeared tranquil, but she could sense small disturbances in the water, tiny ripples that indicated a creature was in need of assistance. Pearl moved with careful, deliberate motions, attentive to shifts in sand, current, and shadow. Each observation allowed her to anticipate what was required, teaching the subtle art of preparation, patience, and understanding. Her destination emerged as a shallow lagoon near a cluster of coral spires. There, a small fish had become trapped between two rocks, unable to navigate the narrow space or free itself from the subtle currents that pushed it against the crevice. Pearl paused, observing the fish's movements and the currents around it. She considered the best approach, realizing that a gentle touch and a patient plan were more effective than any sudden action. This was a lesson in problem solving, tempered with empathy, care, and awareness of the environment. Pearl began by carefully adjusting the flow of water with her fins, creating small currents that nudged sand and loosened debris around the trapped fish. She moved slowly, aware that too much force could frighten or harm the creature. The fish responded gradually, inching out of the tight space with gentle encouragement from the currents Pearl guided. Each motion was deliberate, measured, and aligned with the natural rhythm of the lagoon, teaching Pearl the importance of harmony, patience, and observation in solving problems. After several careful maneuvers, the small fish emerged safely from the rocks and darted into a shadowed nook of coral. Pearl hovered nearby, allowing it to settle, and watched as it acclimated to the surrounding currents. The sense of relief and quiet joy washed over her, reinforcing the understanding that gentle attention and patience often yielded more than hurried action. This was a subtle victory, a meditation on empathy and the careful stewardship of life in her world. As the day progressed, Pearl reflected on the challenge, recognizing how small tasks could teach profound lessons. She observed how currents shifted naturally around obstacles, how creatures interacted with their environment, and how subtle interventions could harmonize life rather than disrupt it. Each ripple, each shift, and each gentle adjustment carried insight, reminding her that challenges were opportunities for learning and growth, rather than moments of stress or urgency. Midday currents guided Pearl toward a nearby meadow of soft sand and swaying kelp. Here, she practiced quiet observation and reflection, considering the ways her actions had influenced the environment and the small creatures she had assisted. Tiny fish moved freely, crabs navigated the ridges with confidence, and shells shimmered faintly in the filtered light. Pearl noted how balance, patience, and attentiveness created harmony, reinforcing the subtle lessons embedded in the day's gentle challenge. Later, Pearl encountered a small group of friends nearby, curious about the earlier events. She shared, through gestures and quiet presence, the steps she had taken to help the trapped fish. Her friends observed attentively, learning the importance of patience, empathy, and mindful action. Together, they practiced subtle movements through the currents, guiding tiny creatures along natural paths and observing the effects of gentle intervention. The exercise was both playful and educational, a quiet reinforcement of harmony, responsibility, and care. By late afternoon, Pearl returned to the shallow lagoon, revisiting the area where the fish had been trapped. She moved slowly through familiar currents, observing the creatures now navigating freely among the rocks. The sand patterns reflected natural flow, kelp swayed gently, and small bubbles drifted upward, carrying light and motion across the lagoon. Pearl realized that challenges once addressed with patience and care, could return spaces to calm balance, providing an opportunity to witness life restored to its natural rhythm. Evening light softened the water into muted blues, scattered with glimmers from bioluminescent creatures. Pearl followed the currents homeward, reflecting on the day's lessons, that challenges need not be stressful, that patience and careful observation could solve subtle problems, and that empathy and attentiveness fostered both harmony and confidence. Her mind absorbed the quiet knowledge that even small actions, guided by understanding and calm, could have meaningful impacts on the world around her. Back in her coral home, Pearl settled among familiar furnishings. Tiny particles floated through the water, reflecting soft glimmers of light. Her fins drifted lazily as she reflected on the gentle challenge she had faced. The small fish she had assisted, the careful movements she had made, and the subtle observations she had practiced reinforced her sense of calm, competence, and connection with her environment. Each lesson deepened her awareness, patience, and quiet confidence. As night fully descended over Bikini Bottom, Pearl allowed herself to sink into calm. The gentle pulse of the ocean, the soft swaying of kelp, and the quiet hum of life around her became a lullaby, guiding her toward rest. The lessons of the day, empathy, patience, attentiveness, and the power of gentle action, mingled with the currents, leading her into peaceful, restorative sleep. And so, Pearl's life continued, each day bringing subtle challenges, quiet opportunities for growth, and gentle reinforcement of patience, empathy, and awareness. Through small acts of care, careful observation, and mindful attention, Pearl Krabs deepened her connection with both her environment and the end times content creatures around her, learning that harmony and understanding are cultivated slowly, quietly, and with deliberate grace. Morning arrived in Bikini Bottom with a gentle hush, the sunlight filtering softly through the water and casting dancing patterns across coral spires, sandy pathways, and swaying kelp. Pearl Krabs awoke slowly, her fins brushing against the familiar textures of her coral home. The currents carried the faint rhythm of life, the subtle movements of small fish, the gentle sway of kelp, and the distant, muted hum of the crusty crab preparing for the day. Today, Pearl sought a quiet moment of reflection, a chance to observe herself and the world around her in deep, mindful stillness. Her morning routine was calm and deliberate. She selected delicate seaweed, tender clams, and tiny crustaceans for breakfast, savoring each bite with full attention. Each chew became a meditation, a rhythm of awareness that grounded her in the present. As she ate, Pearl considered the gentle currents that would carry her to a special place in Bikini Bottom, a location she had long cherished for its tranquility, its subtle beauty, and its capacity to inspire calm reflection. After breakfast, Pearl glided through the familiar streets of Bikini Bottom, following soft currents that guided her toward a secluded cove she had discovered in earlier explorations. The town was alive with quiet activity. Fish darted through hidden nooks, tiny crabs scuttled along sandy ridges, and bubbles rose lazily to the surface. Pearl moved slowly, attentive to the faint patterns in the sand, the gentle ripples of water, and the interplay of light filtering through the waves. Each detail deepened her awareness and set the tone for the contemplative day ahead. The cove was a hidden sanctuary, tucked among tall coral formations and soft patches of kelp. Sunlight filtered in long golden beams, illuminating subtle textures in sand, coral, and shells. Tiny fish flitted gracefully between crevices, and delicate currents swayed strands of kelp in rhythmic arcs. Pearl paused at the edge of the cove, allowing the water to carry her gently as she observed the environment around her. The place felt alive yet still, a perfect combination of movement and calm, where contemplation could unfold naturally. Pearl settled onto a smooth sand ridge, letting the currents flow around her and adjusting her fins to drift lazily in alignment with the water. She closed her eyes briefly, listening to the subtle symphony of life around her. The whisper of kelp in the currents, the soft hum of distant activity, the delicate ripple of sand shifted by passing fish. Each sound, each movement, became a thread in the tapestry of awareness that filled her mind with calm and introspection. As the morning progressed, Pearl reflected on her life in Bikini Bottom, the gentle adventures, the quiet challenges, the subtle mysteries she had explored, and the friendships she had nurtured. She thought of the small lessons the ocean had offered: patience in observation, empathy in gentle action, attentiveness in interaction, and harmony with her environment. Each reflection deepened her understanding, reinforcing the quiet joy of mindful living and the interconnectedness of all creatures in her underwater world. Midday currents carried soft glimmers of light across the cove, illuminating tiny shells partially buried in sand, and the delicate swaying of hidden kelp. Pearl observed a school of small fish moving in synchronized arcs, tracing patterns across the lagoon with fluid grace. She allowed her fins to move in gentle arcs, aligning herself with the rhythm of their motion, and felt a sense of harmony that resonated through her entire being. In these moments, contemplation became a gentle dialogue with the world, a quiet meditation in which the ocean itself seemed to share its wisdom. Pearl noticed subtle changes in the environment, the way sunlight refracted differently as clouds above shifted, the delicate ripple patterns left by passing currents, and the faint vibrations signaling the movement of hidden creatures. Each subtle observation became part of her reflective practice, teaching her the importance of patience, attention, and gentle presence. She understood that contemplation was not merely sitting still, but observing deeply, aligning herself with the soft rhythms of life, and allowing insights to emerge naturally. By afternoon, Pearl's attention turned inward. She reflected on her growth, the independence she had cultivated, the gentle challenges she had faced, and the friendships she had nurtured. Each day had provided opportunities to practice patience, empathy, and harmony, and each moment of reflection reinforced her understanding of the delicate balance between self, others, and the environment. Pearl felt a quiet pride in her ability to navigate life with care and awareness, appreciating that true growth often occurred in subtle, unhurried ways. The currents shifted gently, carrying Pearl toward a deeper section of the cove, where soft sand ridges formed natural resting places. Here, she allowed herself to drift fully, observing the play of light and shadow on the coral, the subtle movements of tiny fish, and the sway of kelp in the rhythmic pulse of water. Each element of the environment became a focal point for meditation, reinforcing the interconnectedness of life and the gentle flow of energy through her world. Evening approached, softening the light into muted blues and silvers. Pearl remained in the cove, her fins drifting lazily, absorbing the serene atmosphere. The ocean's gentle rhythm carried her into a state of quiet reflection, where thoughts and observations intertwined seamlessly. She recognized that moments of contemplation, like the cove itself, were sanctuaries, spaces where insight, calm, and understanding could grow without interruption. As night fully descended over Bikini Bottom, Pearl returned to her coral home, following familiar currents with gentle ease. Tiny particles floated through the water, reflecting faint bioluminescent glimmers, and the town settled into the soft hush of evening. Pearl reflected on her day of quiet contemplation, appreciating the lessons in patience, awareness, and the interconnectedness of life. The gentle rhythms of the ocean, the subtle beauty of her surroundings, and the serene energy of reflection carried her into restful, restorative sleep. And so, Pearl's life continued, a balance of exploration, gentle challenges, observation, friendship, and deep contemplation. Each day offered opportunities to learn, to grow, and to reflect, and each moment of mindful awareness strengthened her connection to the world around her. Through these quiet, intentional practices, Pearl Krabs discovered that true understanding and serenity were cultivated slowly, harmoniously, and with deliberate attention to the soft, flowing rhythms of life in Bikini Bottom. Night had settled fully over Bikini Bottom, turning the ocean into a tapestry of soft blues and shimmering silvers. Pearl crabs lay nestled among the familiar textures of her coral home, the gentle currents brushing softly against her fins and the faint bioluminescent glow from nearby coral illuminating the room in muted patterns. The world outside was calm, every ripple and shadow moving in rhythm with the pulse of the ocean. Tonight, Pearl's reflections would weave together the lessons, experiences, and gentle discoveries of her life, guiding her toward restful dreams. Her day had begun with deliberate calmness, selecting her breakfast with mindful attention, observing the delicate currents, and gliding through the town with quiet curiosity. Each routine, each motion, was a meditation, a practice in awareness that strengthened her connection to the world around her. Pearl considered how far she had come, her gentle exploration of hidden corners, her quiet observations of friends and neighbors, and the subtle challenges she had faced with patience and care. Each experience had taught her something essential about harmony, empathy, and the rhythms of life. Pearl's mind drifted to the friendships she had nurtured over the years. Friends were not simply companions but mirrors, reflecting patience, curiosity, and attentiveness. She remembered shared moments of quiet exploration, floating in lagoons, observing hidden creatures, and arranging delicate shells and kelp patterns together. These experiences had not only strengthened her bonds, but also taught her the value of presence, subtle guidance, and gentle cooperation. Even without words, these relationships were rich with understanding, teaching her that connection could be as calm and flowing as the ocean itself. Her thoughts then turned to the subtle challenges she had encountered, the small fish trapped between rocks, the hidden mysteries of coral crevices, and the careful guidance of currents to restore balance. Each challenge, though minor in appearance, had offered profound lessons in empathy, patience, and thoughtful action. Pearl realized that life's difficulties did not require haste or force, but rather awareness, careful observation, and harmonious intervention. The ocean had taught her that even small gestures could create meaningful ripples, shaping her understanding of responsibility and care. Pearl reflected on her days of contemplation, the quiet moments spent in secluded coves and hidden lagoons. These moments were more than pauses. They were opportunities to harmonize with the environment, to observe, and to meditate on her place within the interconnected currents of life. Watching the sway of kelp, the intricate patterns of sand, and the gentle arcs of tiny fish had nurtured a deep sense of calm and insight. Pearl understood that reflection was as essential as action, offering guidance, serenity, and clarity. The currents shifted gently through her coral home, and Pearl allowed herself to drift, floating in harmony with the soft rhythm of the water. Her fins moved slowly, tracing arcs through the currents, and she reflected on the ocean's subtle lessons: patience, attentiveness, empathy, and harmony. Each wave, each ripple, and each gentle interaction became a reminder of the interconnectedness of all life in Bikini Bottom. Pearl appreciated how every day, no matter how quiet or ordinary it seemed, carried opportunities for learning, growth, and connection. As the night deepened, Pearl considered the mysteries she had explored, the hidden nooks in coral gardens, the subtle shifts in currents, and the quiet patterns left in sand and shells. These small revelations had taught her that observation, patience, and careful attention were as important as direct action. Life, she realized, was full of subtleties. A small gesture could change the course of another's day. A gentle nudge could guide a lost creature, and quiet presence could nurture understanding and harmony. Her thoughts drifted to her father, Mr. Krabs, and the lessons he had imparted. Through his guidance, Pearl had learned diligence, responsibility, and the importance of careful attention to detail. Yet she had also discovered the value of her own experiences, The quiet insights gleaned from observing the world and the gentle lessons of empathy and patience. Life in Bikini Bottom, with its balance of structure, adventure, and reflection, had given her a sense of harmony that she cherished deeply. Pearl allowed her mind to wander further, embracing a gentle daydream of future explorations and quiet adventures. She imagined gliding through hidden passages, discovering new coral formations, and observing creatures she had never encountered. Yet, even in her dreams, the tone remained calm and reflective, curiosity tempered with mindfulness, discovery blended with harmony. She felt the comforting rhythm of the ocean beneath her, the steady pulse of currents, and the soft chorus of life in all its forms. As the night deepened, Pearl's reflections became a bridge to sleep. The currents carried her gently, her fins tracing soft arcs in the water, and the bioluminescent glimmers of coral and floating particles created a lullaby of light and motion. Pearl's mind absorbed the entirety of her experiences, the gentle challenges, quiet celebrations, subtle mysteries, reflective moments, and enduring friendships, transforming them into a calm sense of wholeness and peace. Finally, Pearl allowed herself to fully surrender to rest. The gentle pulse of the ocean, the soft sway of kelp, and the distant hum of life in Bikini Bottom wrapped around her like a protective, nurturing cocoon. Her reflections mingled with the rhythm of currents and the whisper of hidden creatures, carrying her into restorative sleep. In her dreams, she moved gracefully through hidden lagoons, explored secret coral passages, and floated harmoniously among friends and gentle currents, all bathed in the soft, flowing light of the ocean. And so, Pearl's journey continued, not in hurried action or dramatic adventure, but in gentle reflection, calm exploration, and harmonious connection with the world around her. Through patience, empathy, observation, and mindful awareness, Pearl Krabs discovered that serenity and understanding were cultivated slowly, deliberately, and with full presence. Each day, each current, and each quiet interaction became a thread in the tapestry of her life, leading her to rest, growth, and the tranquil beauty of dreams.